My name is Charlyne Graf. I live in Geislingen, and I've been living here quite some time now. And now, after all these years, I can understand why the water that flows through Geislingen was so important for the history of this town. Right now, there's about 28,000 inhabitants in the town. They live in 5 different districts, 5 different valleys. And in the beginning, the town began way up this valley where the water from the Oder comes down into the valley. It was approximately 500 AD when the first mills were set up to mill the grain that was grown up on the hills. They discovered how to use water power to turn the wheels to mill the grain. After that, they used the same water power to saw the wood and also to produce plaster for building. That was the beginning of the industrial center in this town. Another thing that involves this valley and this water is the fact that the major routes for goods going from Italy to Holland went through this valley. And that was a wonderful opportunity for the authorities in this area to levy taxes or custom fees for the goods going through the valley. That valley, of course, is the result of the water flowing through it. That meant money and income for many people here. It also is the later route of the trains that went north-south, east-west, going through this valley up the hill. And it was that train route that gave the town its second name, Geislingen an der Steige. This is the major town church. The church itself is now Protestant. It was actually constructed in 4 years, between the years of 1424 and 1428. Unusually large. It's said that all of the inhabitants of Geislingen at that time could fit inside the church. What I don't know much about, but I've read, the construction of the roof is unusual. It's what's called a lying construction, and the roof is resting without pushing out. So you don't need the supports, the arches on the side of the church that many churches at that time had. There's a lot to be said about this church. So if you're interested, you should take the time to go there and look at it yourself. There are tours offered by the church, and there are days of the week when the church is open and you can go inside and look at the different things. And if you do that, one thing you should not miss is the woodwork. The church choir is made entirely of oak, and it was built around the year 1512. It's very similar to the church woodwork in the minster in Ulm. The carvings on all of the seats for the monks include people and animals, which was supposed to show that all living things are God's creatures. Take the time when you find it. Behind me, you can see the Trout Fountain, which of course means the water's back there again. The water that flows in the Oder also has trout in it. And this Trout Fountain was put up in 1982, and it was designed by Professor Gerhard Rumpf. The pictures and the fountain are based on a quintet written by Schubert, a poet who lived in this town for a short period of time. Pictures of the animals that are on the fountain represent the town or the townspeople. People are shown to be trout. The trout from the local streams, and these trout have personalities. There's a complainer, The complainer has a pig's face. And there's a curious trout with donkey's ears. One of the trouts is very fearful, carries an umbrella. And there's one that's quite insulted, and it has 4 braids. So each of these trout have a personality, just like the people in a town have personalities. What you can't see at the moment is the elephant, the symbol of the House of Helfenstein. That is because of the construction of the building across the street. The trucks, the equipment, need room to maneuver. So the elephant is not there at the moment. It will be returned. And also the elephant turds that are on the ground behind the elephant. Now, and it has been since it stood there in '82, it's a meeting place for people in the town, and especially the children who are waiting for their parents while they're shopping. All right, this is the old customs house. It's not the first customs house in town. It's a very impressive half-timber construction. In the beginning, it provided living quarters for the people working there, and it also stored the goods, which were paid. People didn't necessarily pay in money, but they paid their taxes, they paid their tithes to the church in goods, and therefore they had to be stored. That's what the custom house was used for. At the moment it's being renovated, and it will be used for various city organizations and their offices. Here you have the old town hall. It was built in 1422 by the authorities in Ulm. They erected it on exactly the same spot that the bakers and the butchers offered their wares. They would put up tables and stalls where they could sell their products. The ground floor was the market hall. That means it was open and people could bring their wares, and the townspeople could walk around and buy what they needed. The first floor included a meeting room for the town officials and also a place where they could eat and drink. Behind me you can see the Schubert House. Remember Schubert, the poet who wrote this song about the trout. It was built in the 15th century. Beams in the ceiling of the ground floor prove that. Schubert himself lived here between 1763 and 1769. He taught school in Geislingen, and he also played the organ. He was very famous because he was very critical of important politicians and authorities. I think he got on everyone's nerves at that time. Today this building is used as an official registration office for all of the inhabitants. People get their identity cards there and their passports. All of these houses you've seen with half-timber construction are from the Middle Ages. Geislingen's probably the best preserved Stadt, or from this Staufer times. It never burned. The Rohre, again we've got the water from the Rohre that you can hear in the background, flowed on both sides on the outside of the town wall, and so it provided water, and every household at that time was required to have a pail that they could use to fight a fire. It was also not destroyed or bombed in the Second World War. Part of that because of 78 women in Altenstadt who disobeyed the orders of the authorities at that time and removed the barricades, which might have stopped some of the tanks of the Allied forces invading the town. So, most of the buildings, with very few exceptions, originated in the Middle Ages, even those that are now covered by rendering or stucco. Water, led to the industrialization of this area. Water made the valley that provided the opportunity to have a train line going north, south, east, west. And it also preserved this town. And now, of course, Geislingen has a volunteer fire department. I hope you enjoyed this chat or this small tour through Geislingen. We're back where we started, up by the Volkshochschule, here where the water is still flowing. And of course, the traffic from the B10 is louder than ever. Hope you enjoyed the talk. I enjoyed telling some of the things that I learned when I prepared it. Thank you for listening.